Welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. I'm Don Helbig alongside Ryan Sir. This is episode number 44. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, but you know what? It's not about how I'm doing. You're coming off of a little bit of afterglow because I heard that a bunch of people had a really good time at the Ultimate Coaster event, is the phraseology I've heard. Tell me about coaster
Yeah.
stock over the weekend.
Yeah, Coaster Stock at Kings Island was the eighth time that the park has had that event. It's just really one of the things I think that makes it a fun and enjoyable event for all the attendees. Is just that camaraderie, that sense of community. You know, as you come back to that event year after year, you know, you make more and more friends, and it becomes that big family reunion more so than any of the ERT sessions, you know, that you have in the morning and at night and all of that. So, just seeing the post on social media, just everybody, you know, in groups with all the friends they met, that's what it's all about in this industry, is just having fun with family and friends. And that event certainly capitalizes on that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because, this is what, the eighth year of it, I think. Does that sound right?
The eighth season,
So
correct?
this is the eight, and then you skip 2020, right? So
yeah, I had to skip 2020.
There's been 8 events over 9 years, I think. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Correct.
So, but over the first like 4 years or so was a lot of Beast backstage pictures, maybe Orion backstage picture. Well, not Orion in this time frame, but and then it came a lot of like on social media, seeing a lot of pictures of like, I haven't seen this person since last Coaster Stock. So I see what you're saying about the camaraderie. I think that's really cool. But speaking of camaraderie, where can people find us to be comrades of us?
They can find us. You want to follow us on Twitter. We just hit our 600th follower tonight. We'll get to that in a little bit here, but it is at attractions_GRP. All your favorite podcast channels, such as Apple, everywhere that, podcasts are streaming. And also you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is something that, we bring that up every episode, but we really, would like for everyone to subscribe. We got a lot of fun things planned, but we want to wait till the right time till we have a certain number of subscribers to roll a lot of those things out. But just a lot of opportunities to find us, listen to us. And on our Twitter, we're going to have an episode, I think next week, where we're going to take your questions. We've been fielding those over the past couple of weeks. So if you're listening tonight, you got any theme park related type questions, tweet at us. There's a couple of posts already. Tweet in that thread, and we'll certainly add you to the list of questions for consideration.
Awesome. So 8th year of Coaster Stock. I feel like this day is historically important. Can you tell me why I have that feeling?
Well, on this day, 15 years ago, and it's hard to believe it's been that long already, but Daredevil Robbie Knievel, fortunately we lost him in January, but Robbie Knievel successfully jumped over 24 Coke Zero trucks at Kings Island. He wanted to kind of beat what his dad had done back in 1975 when he jumped over 14 Greyhound buses. So he wanted to beat it by 10. He did that. So today is the anniversary of that event. That was so much fun. One of the highlights of my PR career was working on that event, spending 2 weeks with him, setting up all the different media interviews that we did. We had the satellite media tour. So he was all over the country on different morning shows for 2 weeks. An interesting guy, a complicated guy. He was battling a lot of different, I think demons and things. And then it couldn't have been easy growing up being the son of Evil Knievel, with that. But it was just something that, when I look back at my PR career, that stands out as one of those, highlights, one of those memorable things that you did just because of the success it had and what it did in terms of driving awareness for Kings Island, but also just, to have an opportunity to work with somebody like that.
All thrown together in about 2 weeks, too.
It was. Yeah, we had about 2 weeks to work on that. Came together quick. Robbie called the park. I thought somebody was joking when they said Robbie Knievel.
We got Robbie Knievel on 3 for you, Don.
I think it's my brother. I think it's my brother joking or something. He gets on and he goes, Robbie Knievel, I want to do a jump like my father did in Kings Island. When can we do this? And I was like, and I'm looking, I'm like, it's a Nevada phone number and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, I guess it looks legitimate. So I said, well, let me talk to some people. And, we started talking and it just, sounded like the right thing at the right time. That year was the transition between, we're still underway between, Cedar Fair buying the Paramount Parks. There wasn't really any new capital that year. So it kind of kicked off the event phase, for the Cedar Fair Parks. Because before that, there wasn't a lot of a different type of special events. And that started. And after that, we had Nick Walinda come in and, some other things have happened since then. So that was the start of that back then. But hard to believe that it has been 15 years. But a lot of ways it seems like yesterday. In other ways, it seems like maybe 50 years ago that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I was there front and center, obviously, and you gave me the opportunity to interview him and hang out with him, and I'll never forget that either. So thank you once again for that opportunity. That was I always tell these people I interviewed Robbie Knievel, and they're like, "No, you didn't." I pull up the YouTube video, which has got like thousands of views now.
Thousands of views. The fun thing about, or the interesting about hanging out with Robbie Knievel, he was staying over at Grey Wolf Lodge, right? Yeah. So they've got the little restaurant bar area, whatever. But the entourage that he brought with him, you go in there and there's the guy that played Grizzly Adams, who was in there, and some of these other people from entertainment and movies and everything like that, just all around the room. He brought in an interesting group of people, let's just say that.
Yeah, I mean, and this segment's running way longer than we intended it, but I think that it's worth it. But so for those of you who weren't there, I pity you, because I've made thousands of visits to Kings Island. Where's my commemorative day, Don? You got one for your 1000th visit. But anyway, I made thousands of visits, hands down.
I was the first, though.
Okay, but hands down, my favorite day. No question whatsoever. Yeah. And the event was not a bunch of people went out to the parking lot and you had this thing set up and he jumped. It was food vendors. It was a stage, live bands. It was merchandise. It was this huge operation. And I tell you what, you guys kicked yourselves into high gear. Plus, you were a new team. Like you mentioned, Cedar Fair just bought the acquisition parks. So you guys had only worked together for like a year. And but anyway, Don, enough about Robbie Knievel. God rest his soul. Good man. Demons, but love the guy. Who do we have as a guest, as a legend on the show today?
Well, Ryan, our guest tonight is somebody that you and I have talked about, going back to just creating the idea for this podcast that we wanted to have on. And it is Mike Graham. He's the engineer and development for the Gravity Group. Mike, welcome to the Attractions Group podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, sorry we went on and on about Robbie Knievel with you in the room. That must have been embarrassing.
No, it's fantastic. Actually, it's a part of history, local history with obviously the dad and the son and Kings Island. So it's kind of like when you have Kings Island, there's probably some type of motorcycle jumping in that history. If you're looking for a multi-decade synopsis of the park history,
were you there that day, or do you remember it? Oh,
I was not.
Have been there. Well, for those of you who don't know, so Mike obviously runs the Gravity Group, but big coaster guy, like coaster enthusiast. I've seen you around Kings Island quite a bit, in addition to seeing you around like on the IAPA floor and stuff for reasons that we're going to discuss here. But thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Can we start from the beginning? How did you get involved in the theme park industry?
It probably goes back to probably 6th grade. In 6th grade, my brother and I built just anything and everything around the house. Lego was very much one of the common, tools that we use to build stuff. I like to build, machines, amusement rides, you name it. I grew up about 45 minutes from Cedar Point. And so we were there a decent amount. Around that time, I hadn't really been on roller coasters, but I've been fascinated by them. And so a few years, or in 6th grade, somebody told me that a mechanical engineer was somebody who designs machines. And I'm like, well, if I could do that for a living, like, what else would I want to do? Like, that sounds awesome. Like, architect sounds kind of cool. Artist kind of sounds cool, but, designing machines, like, that'd be awesome. And so a few years later, this is going to date me. We were in California. We were on a family trip. One of those epic road trips, before all of us went off to college and everything else. I was early high school, and we were out with my cousins in LA, and my dad had always wanted to take us to Disneyland, and so this was our opportunity to go to Disneyland. And my cousins, who are also kind of in that junior high school range, they're like, we don't want to go to Disneyland. Let's go to Six Flags. And so, I remember the commercials on the TV were for the Viper that opened that year. And we were just like, oh, wow, that looks amazing. And so we ended up, going to Magic Mountain. And it was just kind of a light bulb. It was like, wait, this is a machine. Somebody's designing this machine. I want that person to be me. Like that would be like the ultimate, ultimate machine to design. And so when I got back, I started, kind of had this, okay, I'm building stuff. Let's build a roller coaster. And so I, building a roller coaster model at that time, this was, before Connect, before Coaster Dynamics. So I literally went down to the hardware store, just started looking around, see what I could make a roller coaster model out of, because I just had this passion. I needed to build, something. So I ended up finding some dowels and some poly tubing and some wood. And, I started, building the roller coaster model from scratch. The irony is the name of it ended up being the Scarlet Fever, and it had a red track, and it was kind of like Magnum a little bit, and made some Lego cars, and then those didn't spin very well. I got into ball bearings, blah, blah, blah. And so then right after that, I was like, okay, I've learned a lot. I really want to make another one. I want to make it a little bit closer to the Viper at Magic Mountain. And so it was probably around 9th or 10th grade, I started building the next roller coaster models, an Aero multi-looper, actually kind of similar to Vortex at Kings Island as well. Ironically, I called that one the Black Plague because it was like black and green, and it kind of had some different colors to it. But a friend of mine, when I was building the first one, he's like, oh, if I had a roller coaster, I'd call it the Black Plague after the Scarlet Fever. So I don't know how the whole disease thing came about, but so I was building that through high school and college. That was a big project. It was about 7 foot tall, fully functional, had little ball bearings and the whole thing. You can see it on YouTube. You do search for Black Plague roller coaster, you'll find it. And then as I was going through college, I was, even in high school, I joined ACE, American Coaster Enthusiasts, as well as Great Ohio Coaster Club, and just started, kind of absorbing the industry. I had, the flyers from Aerodynamics, and, I thought, this would be, something I really want to pursue. The more I learned about it, the more I heard things like, there's a better chance being an astronaut than a roller coaster designer, and have a plan B. You're not going to, you shouldn't expect to come out of college and jump right into roller coaster design. That's not really something that's statistically practical, particularly to plan on. So, and so that was fine. I was also really interested in aviation and aerospace stuff. So I ended up getting a co-op job at a pump company. They're actually a supplier for GE aircraft down here in Cincinnati. This was up in Northern Ohio. And so that was fun. I enjoyed that. Definitely not as much as roller coasters. And then upon graduation, I actually had a commissioned roller coaster model for an ice cream shop out in Colorado. And so I built that. And as I was building that, I was getting my resumes out there. And it was in 1999 when Custom Coasters was building 7 rides for 2000 opening. And they needed some help. And so I had my application in there. A little bit prior to that, a couple years before, I rode the Raven. And that totally transformed my opinion of wood coasters and, just what coasters can be. It just kind of blew my mind. And so I was like, I want to work at Custom Coasters. That'd be like my ultimate dream job. So I got hired on for that year. I helped out with quite a few of those rides as we were wrapping up the structural detailing and design of those rides. I remember going up, I think one of the, this is a little fun, nerdy coaster enthusiast thing, is I had my roller coaster website talking about my model, but I also had some construction pictures of the conversion of Geauga Lake to Six Flags. And so I was going by there every week or two, uploading construction shots. And within a matter of week, I was taking a construction shot of Villain and then drawing structure for Villain. So it was just kind of mind-boggling of like, I don't know what's going on here, but this is pretty awesome. So so that was really, really cool transition into custom coasters. And so, so when I got on, we finished those 7 rides. Then we did the 2 rides in 2001, which were Cheetah and Cornball Express. And then in 2002, we did Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain at Indian Beach, as well as Cliff's New Mexico Rattler. Of course, most people know New Mexico Rattler was not finished by Custom Coasters, but it was finished by the construction team doing that. And so the story there goes is it was kind of, early summer, and we were essentially told, we don't have a job anymore. We're going to be closing the company. And so it was a huge blow. I had moved to Cincinnati just a couple years before that. I knew some people, but it was all kind of a new adventure a little bit. And so it was a really tough time. But Chad Miller, Corey Keeper, Larry Bill, and myself were the 4 engineers at Custom Coasters. And we said, we like what we're doing. We're confident as engineers. We're not as familiar with the construction project side of things because, that was Denise and Charlie and their family running the, construction side of Custom Coasters. So we're like, hey, let's start an engineering firm. Obviously, our goal is to design wooden roller coasters. So we went to all the different clients that we had done coasters for and said, hey, what engineering services, do you need around the park? So we did some different foundation design, other types of structural analysis, all over the country, really. And so that was, kind of a way to get some income, get enough income to go to IAPA and keep the marketing thing going. We all had kind of different ways to make it work, from a family point of view, whether we had another job or, just couldn't make it work for other reasons. So it was some tough years. In 2004 is when we started with Mount Olympus. We'd been talking with them a little bit over the few years about doing a ride, and turns out that 2004 was kind of the trigger. There was like, okay, let's go ahead and start this ride that is going to go underground. It's going to be called Hades. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, definitely, a prop out to the Lascaris family for giving us our first big, design ride. And so we used the same crew that we had at Custom Coasters for that ride, and we were able to kind of use that crew for a few years. And pretty soon we, kind of brought that crew in-house, became the general contractor, and then we could provide a turnkey ride to those who wanted that. So that was kind of the trend. Just it didn't take that many years until we were the general contractor. So here we are in 2023, and we've got a lot of different innovations. We've met a lot of people through the industry. I feel like I know a decent amount, but there's plenty more to meet. But I really enjoy everybody in the industry that I've met and been able to hang out with. And it's kind of a, even though they're competitors and, people that not related to roller coasters at all, I do feel like the whole industry is a big family. When somebody hurts or passes away, we kind of all feel it. So, that's where we are today. I kind of skipped like 10 years right there.
We'll cover those later. It's fine.
That's how I got in the industry and where I'm at today.
All right. The heart and soul of the Gravity Group is wooden roller coaster design. So where are some of the places in the world where guests can ride a Gravity Group coaster?
So in the U.S., there's quite a few places. We've got Hades 360 that I mentioned earlier, which we converted from Hades to Hades 360 in 2013. Kentucky Kingdom's Kentucky Flyer. We've got the Voyage at Holiday World. We've got Oscar's Wacky Taxi in Sesame Place in Philadelphia. Storyland's Roarosaurus up in New Hampshire. Quasi's Wooden Warrior in Connecticut. I'm missing quite a few. Switchbacks at ZDT in Texas. Tato Park's, or I should say Emerald Park now in Ireland. They used to be called Tato Park, so we always usually just call it Tato Park. So Ireland, we have 2 rides, actually 3 rides in France. Park Asterix, we upgraded their ride to 2 Zeus. Park St. Paul, which is outside of Paris, their Wood Express. Wallaby in Lyon's area of France, which is pretty close to Switzerland. Sweden's Gronelund. And we have about 11 or 12 rides in China, Shanghai and outside Beijing and Tianjin. Whole bunch of other places over there, and a whole bunch that I'm forgetting about. But we're all over the place. We've done a lot of worldwide travel as well as domestic travel, and it's a unique ride experience. I think there's a bit of a Gravity Group signature on each ride that we do, something that makes it fun and unique and different. And often there's some type of design challenge that we have.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, ground up wooden coasters is what you're known for. But what you're also starting to be known for is the rehab of wooden coasters. Tell us about, my understanding is that the process that you're using is unique and new. Can you tell us about the process of doing what you can say? I don't know what's a trade secret and what's not at this point, but can you tell us what you can tell us about the process and how it came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've always strived for innovation. And so we started, really helping out parks. Instead of just retracking the way they typically had been doing, we said, hey, let's get some numbers in here. So we go in, look at the actual track, coordinates via survey or scan, and kind of say, okay, well, here's what your track's doing. Let's go ahead and adjust it, almost like a chiropractor that Don might need at some point shortly here with his shoulder. And so we kind of redefine where that path should go. And we work with our tracker crews to then, this is the traditional way to do it, to then retrack it and adjust that track back to a theoretical ideal shape through that area. Often a park has, they're retracking the same area over and over and over, and they just need to really reshape that track. And so that's been the way we've been doing it for 20 years or so. And then probably about 14 to 16 years ago, we really started doing it a little bit more with the numbers, more so a different way, but it was very very helpful. And then something else we introduced about 14 years ago was a thing called Gravity Goop. And so one of the things that you have for a wood coaster is you have a series of laminates, and the train essentially rolls across the series of laminates, and those laminates are laid horizontal to each other. They're basically stacked up like a deck of cards, and there's a little bit of motion between each layer, and particularly over time as the wood fatigues and the nails that hold the layers kind of aren't holding as well anymore. There's some shrinkage and expansion. And so those layers start to sag and get a little bit weaker. And so what happens there is we experience what we often call washboarding, where the structure supports are still there, but the track is kind of almost dipping between them, and actually physically does dip between them, particularly with the train weight. What you can do to strengthen the track is basically kind of bond a few of those layers together. So instead of those layers acting separately as it's bending, they're actually a little bit more solid, and they're tied together, and there's a lot less bend. So that's one of the things that we did. We innovated, maybe 14 to 16 years ago. I forget exactly when it was when we started doing that. And you actually ended up having a track that's about 8 times stronger over the years. And so that was really successful. However, we didn't really feel it was enough. We wanted to have something that was a lot more precise than, even our team, which has really, really good trackers. It still comes down to the artistry and the craftsmanship of that person to actually cut the shape of the track and also lay the heights of the track. We shoot them in with survey equipment, get everything as close as we can, but there's still some reliance on those people. And so we started kicking around an age-old idea of, instead of having your laminates of your track horizontal, you actually stand them on end. So it's just like a joist of a deck. A joist of a deck you wouldn't want to put horizontal, or else it would just be like a diving board. So when you have it vertical, you have something that's a lot more rigid. However, and this is something that has been used in wooden coasters for decades. A great example is Camden Park's Big Dipper and Little Dipper. If you look on that track closely, what they have is they have vertical laminates that are bent around the curve, and then they have horizontal laminates in the straights to create the shape of the roller coaster hills. When you have a vertical layer, it's pretty boring because you can't bend that up and down. You're just going around a curve. And so we said, hey, there's something to that. Let's figure out a way that we can utilize that strength, but in a predetermined way. So what we created was a thing that we call engineered pre-cut track, and the pre-cut track kind of comes in two different varieties. One is the vertical track, and what the vertical track does is it uses that strength, and then as you are going up and down a hill, we actually cut that shape into those vertical pieces and then put them together essentially like puzzle pieces or like erector set or Lego. And so you're creating this really perfect shape of track that's far more precise than we can, shoot in with our survey equipment and our team. And so number one, you have a predefined shape that's super strong. When it's vertical, it's actually about 20 times stronger than the traditional nailed track. And so that's one of the things that's really propelling there's these refurbs. We also have a horizontal pre-cut. And so instead of relying on the guys to, cut these perfect curves, 100 feet in the air, upside down, we actually predefine that shape and cut that as well. And so they can just lay it where it goes and, use gravity goop. And so you have a really, really great track. Great example here is right on the Beast. So Beast's first drop is the vertical track. It goes up and down, really smooth. It hits the tunnel, starts twisting and curving. We switch into the horizontal track, which is all pre-cut. And so you hit that nice curve that our engineer Brian Kosmak kind of reworked and just had a really great, that whole section of Beast feels so good and so right. And so, it's all based off numbers and our engineered pre-cut track. We started that in 2019. We had a test section of horizontal and vertical on Kentucky Flyer, and it's still doing absolutely fabulous today. In 2020, we had, I forget how many jobs, and then COVID hit, and it was a bit tough because we couldn't travel. And it was really a godsend that we got the Racer project because, we could, not travel out of the country. We kind of worked up to as far as we could. We had a team over at Park Asterix doing track work. We did, multiple year track work over there. So we kind of got to the point where COVID started shutting things down, and we're like, okay, we got to get our guys out of there as soon as we can. So we pulled those guys back. We started the Racer project. And that worked out really well because, we were having to do everything with all the COVID restrictions, both travel and fabrication and everything else. And so that really worked out well to have a pretty sizable job there. And that was kind of the big launching pad, of the product. We announced that to the public at that point. And then we also announced it to the industry. We were able to receive a Innovation of the Year golden ticket for the track that year. So that was really cool. And so, we've been promoting it ever since. Last year was a big year, about 3,000 feet of track total. We did Park Asterix and the Beast. And then this year was 10 different projects. So we did 6,500 feet of total track, a little bit longer than the Voyage in the amount of track that we put out this year. So we see it only increasing from here, and we feel it's a great product for all parks that are looking for an improved solution on just doing the same track replacement that they're having to fight with every year.
Yeah, it certainly has made a difference in the ride experience. From my end, riding the Racer and the Beast, I thought both of those rides. Last year I think I go back to I'm going to start with when they changed from the buzz bars to the individual lap bars. But from that point on, 1991 through today, those two coasters are running, better than they have in, 30 plus years.
I agree. I concur.
Well, appreciate hearing that. And we do think about you, Don, whenever we touch the Racer.
When there were some little slight profile changes too. I know when that was first being made, and the traditionalists and that, they get a little bit upset that you're tampering with things, that and the Beast. But I also tell them that, these rides were designed, Racer 50 something years ago, the Beast 40 plus years ago. If they were being designed today, this is how it would be. This would be what the profile looks like. You have computers now. You didn't have those back in those days. It was all done by hand calculations and things. But you've done a lot of different projects. So which one would you call your most challenging and why?
Challenging, I would say, back at Custom Coasters, the most challenging one was Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain at Indian Beach. We had about 6 months to design cars, a vertical lift, and the first magnetic brakes to go on a wood coaster. And it was a huge amount of work to try to get that all done. But I would say even since then, I would say the most challenging was probably the Timberliner development project. As we were developing cars, we knew we needed something that put less force on the track. And so, that took, a few years of development, and, we were able to launch those in 2011. And that right there is actually one of the key reasons why, our tracks have been so successful, even independent of the track, is the trains put about 3 times less force onto the track horizontally, and then about half the force vertically, just due to the way we engineered them. And so, we designed those from the ground up. There's really nothing else that really looked like it at the time. And that was certainly a big challenging process. We had the Lost Coaster cars under our belt, but that was kind of a one-off oddball train. So we saw the need, and we jumped on it, and we knew it was going to be a lot of unknowns, but we feel like we really created a great product that we can have. Corey Keepert, he's 6'6", he can ride with a 40-inch high kid, next to each other, completely safely, completely enclosed, plenty of airtime. So those are some challenging constraints to have when you're designing particularly a wood coaster train, where there's a lot of tradition and kind of minimal restraints and minimal electronics monitoring, all those kind of things.
Awesome.
And then what was your other question? I forget.
No, you answered it. Just talking about what was the most challenging and why, and so
yeah. But speaking of different gravity group projects, the one. Obviously, it probably wasn't the only one this year, but the one, at least locally, that's the most well-known is you guys did a huge rehab job on the Grizzly at King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Yep. That was another primarily Brian Kosmak project, and the park wanted to essentially put some money into it so that it would last, longer than the traditional tracking that they had been doing. As we started getting into it, we're like, hey, you know what? There's a little bit more we can do. A little bit, like the thought we had with racers, like, hey, let's go ahead and, kick this up at least a little bit of a notch, just to add a little bit more excitement. Kind of piggybacking what Don said. If they had our tools, then the ride might turn out a little bit different. So. In this case, one of the things that we observed was that standard design was used at multiple parks, and in case of Grizzly, it ended up with probably between a 10 and 15 foot amount of structure at the bottom of the first drop. Going back to early design days at Custom Coasters, it was always take your drops down as far as they could go. And so in this case, we're like, yeah, let's go ahead and take that first drop down. Let's sculpt it a little bit so we get, airtime everywhere. So as we were looking at the different sections, we said, okay, let's go ahead and enhance this, smooth this out. They're having some track issues, acceleration issues, structure issues, things like that. So we go in and do our engineering magic, and out pops the perfect coaster. No, not quite, but it's a lot of work. And so, that we did a huge section of that ride. I think it was somewhere around a third of the ride. We have a new track on there, and that's all a combination of vertical and horizontal engineered pre-cut track on that ride. So I know when Brian had his first ride, he was like, this is really fun. This is really, really, really good. And so he's like, I rode it like 15 times that day. So he's actually going down there this weekend with his family. So it's a cool thing. We're designing coasters, but we're really designing the experiences and the memories. When we launched Kentucky Flyer, we actually took some of our company people, whoever wanted to go down for media day, and my youngest daughter, who was 4 at the time, she was actually 42. She's really a giant. But she was plenty tall, and it was great having my family down there for media day because it was a family coaster. It was designed for 40-inch height requirement, and I find out like the end of that day, I find out that it was actually take your kid to work day, and I had no idea. But I was like, I think I won. I think that's like probably one of the best take your kids work today or work days ever. So that was really fun. And then also the experience like at Coaster Stock, my family joined me after my talk, and that same daughter, she's 8 years old now, she was able to ride Diamondback for the first time. And it was like, you know, everybody can ride the big rides now in our family, and we were able to experience that as a family. And so, you know, as we have had kids, you know, it's kind of transitioned from, oh, we just like to design roller coasters to, you know, what would my family think about this? You know, what about the thrill seekers? What about the acers? What about, you know, we kind of look at all the different people, you know, what is the, you know, what are all the audiences? I think we focus a little bit more on the audience than just the actual physical ride at this point.
You know, we touched a little bit on the ride experience being enhanced. You know, you look at the Beast, the Racer, the Grizzly now. Besides that being better, what are some of the advantages, say for the park, the maintenance team and everything, of using your new pre-cut engineer track?
So the amount of work that the parks have to do is drastically decreased. When you have the correct shape, you have a lot less force into the track. And so, you know, the amount of bolt tightening and, you know, wood replacement, that kind of stuff are the long-term maintenance effects of this. And so what we're seeing is just, you know, really great things for, you know, reduction in maintenance. And then also it's kind of like if you get the shape right, you make the maintenance people happy, you get the guests happy, you get corporate happy, like everybody is, you know, happy about that ride. And it all kind of stems from, you know, getting it right. So once you get it right, all those other things kind of cascade. You know, something like Grizzly, the park wanted us to use Ipe, which is a very, very hard wood. And so in this case, you know, we used that on all the sections that we did. And so that's a lot harder wood than the typical pine that we use. And so from a maintenance point of view, you know, there's that track is very, very stout, and I really, you know, don't see hardly any maintenance needed for the foreseeable future, really. So it's pretty exciting to be able to put out a product like that where you're really confident, you know, that the park is going to be happy.
Well, I mean, speaking of good projects and stuff, I remember the first time I met you was probably 2008, and at the time you were super excited because a little ride up in Erie, Pennsylvania called Ravine Flyer 2 had just opened. Now, Ravine Flyer 2 is not the tallest, it's not the fastest, it's not the longest, but it seems to be beloved by enthusiasts and people that love roller coasters. Why do you think that is?
It's a really unique, special ride, and about 5 minutes ago, I realized that I totally forgot to mention that is one of the rides that's around. And in fact, this week, the patriarch of the park, Paul Nelson, he passed away. He was quite a visionary, and I think his passion shows through that ride. There was a Ravine Flyer 1. It wasn't really called 1 at the time. It was just Ravine Flyer, and it went over this like 2-lane path. And the geography of the area is such that there's this path that goes down to the state park that goes out into Lake Erie. It's a beautiful area, Prescott State Park. And they had some type of covenant in the I don't even know what that was, but they had the rights to go over that road with a roller coaster, and they retained that right. And so, you know, that was in the 20s when that ride was going, and it closed in, you know, maybe the 30s or something like that. So really since then they talked about trying to do a wooden coaster or some type of roller coaster over that highway, was what it ended up being. It was a 4-lane highway with bike paths. So all of a sudden it went from like a 20-foot bridge to a 150-foot bridge, I think is what it ended up being. And so you have this really unique experience. You know, when you're driving along, you see this beautiful big blue bridge, and there's this roller coaster flying over it, and it's just like, whoa, what is that? It's kind of like this, I don't know what I'm seeing right now. I can't quite, you know, fathom what's going on here. And also when you're riding, it's the same thing. It's like, wow, I'm flying over this bridge and there's cars underneath me, going at highway speeds. It's like, this is bizarre. And so we used the topography of both the road, and then also there's a bluff that goes from the park down to Lake Erie. So it's maybe 50 to 80 foot tall of a bluff. And so we have the ravine is, I believe it's, technically the road is the ravine, but it's also this slope. And so you have the coaster where we were able to use that to its full advantage. So even right near the end of the ride, there's a dive. It starts at 90 degrees and it dives down. Maybe it's a 50 to 70 foot drop, and it's almost right at the end of the ride. So it's a big surprise because you kind of feel like the ride's over, and then it just kind of kicks into second gear. So the whole ride is a bit of a surprise story, because you go down the first drop, you go over the highway, you kind of curve around, and then you come back over the highway, go into a tunnel. There's always something going on, and so you get some really nice summer night rides on it, or evening rides, and you see as you go up the lift hill, you see Lake Erie, whether it's a sunset or just out over the water. It's just gorgeous. And so there's all these different sensations going on that ride that are very unique. And so, of course, as coaster designers, we're like, we got to make sure that the airtime's good and the surprises and everything else is really clicking. And so you have this really fantastic ride from a dynamic point of view with all these other sensations, and you really create a really special ride.
As Ryan mentioned, it's not the tallest, fastest, longest, or anything like that, but it's one of those coasters. Train comes back in the station, you get off the ride, you want to get right back in line and ride it again. You just can't get enough of it. Just so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mike, what advice would you give to someone that wants to design roller coasters for a living? And you kind of touched on it earlier, that it's it's not that easy to just walk in. Not a lot of people doing it, but if somebody really had an interest, what recommendation would you have to get involved?
Yeah, first of all, we do have an FAQ on our website if you want to get a little bit more into some of our recommendations for college paths and stuff. Short story is, if you're wanting to design roller coasters, you would need to probably go down either mechanical engineering or civil engineering path. However, what we find is that when we start talking to people, sometimes their interest is, they think that's what it is, but then they realize, no, I really like more like the presentation, the animation, the storytelling of the ride itself, the theming, or the architecture, or you kind of end up being like, I just really love how this park, has this roller coaster set in a certain area and the whole development around that. And then you also have a lot of other suppliers that are, what in the automotive industry you might call them second tier suppliers. But what's kind of cool is some of these companies, they work with all the other manufacturers, and so you get to be still a part of that. In fact, you get to be a part of more projects than just working for one company, and so you get to kind of be a part of the team for many projects, depending on how you're doing that. There's also a lot of in the other world of non-manufacturers, you have like Universal and Disney, where the Imagineers and the creatives and those companies, there's so many different projects they're working on. And I know a lot of people that have gone in there thinking they want to design roller coasters, but they're like, what, designing this one ride vehicle or designing this was just so much more kind of mind-blowing and engaging than I ever thought it would be. I wanted to do, ride design. I wanted to, create the path of the ride. So, but I think some of the things that I would recommend is make sure that you're not just focused on engineering. If you're going to work for a ride company, you're going to work for a small company. That's just, all of the companies around here are small. So, we like to say you're going to wear many hats. You can do a lot of dishwashing. What we're saying there is, the many hats are, you might be doing an analysis one day, and you might be trying to figure out how a part is made the next day. The next day, you might be trying to figure out why the machinist made the part wrong. And the next day, you might be out surveying. So there's a lot of different, variety of just in the technical side of things. But, for instance, yesterday I was dealing with a marketing company. They wanted to do an article on us. So I was trying to, use my creative writing gene and, come up with some answers for them. There's a lot of graphics that we do, some of which is in-house, some of it's not. So there's a lot of different hats that we wear that you don't think about as an engineer, giving podcast interviews, things like that. That's, presenting, being a presenter for us at trade shows, at our booth or at other events. There's a lot of different things that we do. And then the other thing is, the dishwashing, when I started, and I still do sometimes, is I'm drafting. I'm just doing a lot of manual drafting or programming or other things like that, it kind of seems mundane sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't, depending on what your opinion of that is. But you're not going to jump into a firm and start designing roller coasters. You're going to jump into a firm and say, hey, here's a transfer track. Go ahead and, get this all drafted up or modeled so that we can make it. And you're like, okay, that sounds okay. And that's just all part of it. You're going to be part of a team doing this big thing. But some people think that the ride design path is what we do all the time, and that's probably like 1% of the amount of work on a project. So if you're just focused on that, that comes, but it's not. If your expectation is that, you probably want to change your expectation a little bit.
Excellent point.
And
Good
also,
advice.
we're also looking for a variety of experience. Whenever we look at resumes, we look at what else you're doing, where else you worked. All those kind of skills transfer in some way, shape, or form. Even what your hobbies are. If you're a gearhead and you're an engineer, we're like, hey, that's pretty cool that you understand how things work and you can physically take them apart, because that's a big deal for us.
Oh,
Sorry,
no, you're totally fine. When people think about wooden coasters and what's been developed and so on, probably the layperson would think that the technology hasn't changed in 100 years, but especially in the past 10 or 15 years, things have changed greatly. I mean, RMC's doing their thing. You've got Titan Track on the other side, and then Gravity Group has this precision cut stuff, which is a new development. Talk about the future of Gravity Group and where do you think the company will be in 20 years?
Well, we've had since COVID, there's been a lot of capital conservance what's the word of being conservative with capital at parks, and so I do see us getting into more new rides again shortly, and also, as we innovate. We have so many different things on the design board that we haven't got to yet that would either help things out or create a twist on the wooden coaster that could be really marketable or really memorable. So I think the wood coasters are still our passion and bread and butter, but I kind of see some different adaptations maybe on the wood coaster of what we know it today versus what we might see in the future. Can't really say what those are, but those are some different ideas. I know a lot of different companies in the industry are all innovating as well. So we feel like we're positioned in a good place for innovation, and we have a great team that we can develop stuff pretty quickly and adeptly. So we're pretty excited about the future and how we're doing things. I think there's also a lot of innovation in our process that most people don't know or care about, that we put a lot of effort into making it easier for us to make stuff. So certainly the engineer pre-cut track is the pinnacle of that so far. But I see a lot of those things that the guest and the maintenance people might not see, but certainly makes our life easier.
Awesome, good point.
All right, well, Mike, we really appreciate having you on the podcast tonight. Where can our listeners find you on social media, your website, any other channels that you might have out there?
Yeah, website, thegravitygroup.com. Don't forget the. And we have social media. We have Twitter is The Gravity Group. Instagram is The Gravity Group LLC. Facebook is The Gravity Group. We also have a YouTube channel where we're putting our stuff. I think it's The Gravity Group is the username. So yeah, we're all over. We're not on Snapchat or the others, just on the biggies. as a company, it's a little bit a weird space, because we're not as much engaging with our customers as we are with our fans through social media. But our customers are also our fans. So it's a little bit of an interesting posture that we take as a company to really cater to both their customers and our fans.
All right. Well, Mike, stick around because right now we have a little segment that Ryan and I do every episode. It's called the Pick Six. Ryan, get us started.
Awesome. So story number 1. So we're going to talk about a coaster that's not Gravity Group, unfortunately, but it is innovative. And Mike, I'd love to hear your opinion on it. But the surf coaster, Pipeline, the surf coaster, opened at SeaWorld Orlando last week. It seemed like it's got some positive reviews. It's kind of a B&M's retake, shall we say, on the stand-up coaster, and it bobs up and down with a cylinder in the bottom. What are your thoughts, Mike? What were your thoughts when you initially saw the design?
I would say that I was very bandwagon. It seemed like a lame idea. But after watching, and hearing from people on their reviews, I feel like they really did get a gem there. That's a great innovation, variety, and also marketable. I haven't talked to Jonathan Smith, who's, one of the key guys at SeaWorld about that ride, but I really think they made a great choice. It's looks like a high capacity, very different ride experience than anybody else. And in the Orlando market, it's really tough to have something new and different, particularly high capacity in B&M like the big parks.
Don, your thoughts?
I've talked to a couple people this past weekend during Coaster Stock that had been to SeaWorld and had ridden the ride, and they said that it was they were surprised it was comfortable because they thought the shoulder restraints might be a little too tight, but they said there's enough room there in that. So they said they enjoyed it. Rode it 2 or 3 times, a lot of fun. So I think they got a winner there.
I agree.
Story number 2. Wildcat Hershey Park opening date has been announced. It is Friday, June the 2nd. Mike, what are your thoughts on the work they did on that coaster?
It's an interesting conversion. I think it's a pretty, I would say, pretty typical as far as what I'm seeing so far for Rocky Mountain to do. I think that park, it's a good choice for the park. I think in general, even though I just really dislike any wood coasters being converted, I think it's a good choice for the park. They needed something that was kind of next level, and I think that that ride's going to give that to them. So yeah, wish them the best. Obviously, it's a kind of 2 competitors of ours that we deal with, but we've known them a long time too, and we're kind of a close industry as well as competitors.
What about you, Ryan?
Well, it's fun. It's very coincidental that Mike would be on because I know that there are a lot of purists out there that were showing a lot of concern when there were a lot of like Titan track projects and stuff like that were concerned that like the true wooden coaster as we know it might be dying. So it's really reassuring that there's more than one product on the market for this major overhaul stuff, and that the Gravity Groups is like a pure wood thing, because I'm sure that alone may be something that's attractive to parks. So I think it's really cool. Now, it does look like a great ride. Yeah, I mean, you know what you're getting with RMC, but the trains certainly look good. We saw them unveiled a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I'm sure they have a winner on their hands. All right, so next story is story number 3. So Walt Disney World, the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser, 2 nights for $7,000. How could they fail? How could they fail, guys? It's they paused bookings for the rest of the month to try to reschedule people, but it's going to close in September and take its last flight. So many questions here. I think that obviously I was tongue in cheek. The price was out of the market for a lot of people that would be attracted to that sort of thing. But what do you do with that building now? You can't tear it down. It was hundreds of millions of dollars, and it looks like a freaking Star Cruiser. Mike, are you a Star Wars guy?
Yeah, I do appreciate Star Wars, and we went to Disney last year, and I was a little unsure. I've got three girls. I've got 13-year-old, 10-year-old, and 8-year-old girls. And so we were like, okay, how do we experience Star Wars at Disney if they hadn't seen, the shows? And so we started watching them, and they really started, getting really into them. And so I think that kind of propelled my interest a little bit more. I seen all of them, seen the Mandalorian, all that stuff. But yeah, I have not been the Star Wars convention style fan, just a kind of a casual fan. I've got plenty of other interests that need to have attention. But yeah, I when I heard the news, I was like kind of wondering the same questions, like what are they going to do with that? How are they going to maybe repurpose it in the future? But I was like, but my girls are fans now. Like, how about like, $400 a night or something like that, something that we could still experience that, before it shuts down. And so I was like, for a hot second, I was like, how can I make a trip down there? And then I realized it's just really not going to be practical.
Yeah, I think that might be the story of it. It's plus, I don't know necessarily, with the Star Cruiser at the price point that it was at. And I think like 10,000 was the most expensive, but that was like the suite for several people. But if you're two adults and the kid's into Star Wars, are you going to drop that kind of money? But if you're two grown adults that are that much into Star Wars, do you have that kind of money? No offense, I'm saying it as it is. Don, you stayed at the Star Cruiser. How was that?
Not a Star Wars fan.
No.
So for me, this is like, okay, it wasn't something that I would look to do or have a lot of interest in, just because I never got into the movies. And so for me, I was lost. I wouldn't have understood what's going on, or what I'm supposed to be looking for, what it's all about, just because I didn't grow up with it, didn't get into it at any time.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think that might be more inducive of like the overall problem, where like I've never seen a Harry Potter movie, but I'm gonna risk going to Universal to ride the Harry Potter ride because I know I can enjoy it. But your statement is a perfect example. I've seen Star Wars. I'm not really into it. Do I want to spend that much money to stay at a Star Wars hotel for 2 days? I just think that I've never seen Disney fail this quickly. Under
Yeah, I'll
about a
stay at
year.
All Star Sports. That'll work for me. Like All Star Sports, All Star Movies, any of those kind of places. The Pop Century, any of those kind of places would be more appealing to me than doing that. Moving on, Disneyland's Fantasmic. It's going to be put on hiatus until at least Labor Day. Mike, thoughts?
Honestly, I don't really have any thoughts on this. I know that parks always have an interesting timeline of how their projects are going. Being on the project side of things, I always hear about pushing off things, or I was like, yeah, there's obviously some business decisions behind there, and or project delays, or big picture things. Right now, Disney's obviously going through a lot of restructuring, and who knows what else. It seems like Disney's in the news every day about something or other. So about Fantasmic itself, really don't have any other comments. Just kind of killing time on the air.
Ryan, you and I have talked about
Yeah.
Fantasmic. I mean, we both love the show.
Mm-hmm. So this is just at Disneyland, right? Walt Disney World still has
Correct.
it, right? So Mike, if you didn't read, well, you could easily find this on the internet. It's rather spectacular, but the dragon caught fire in the middle of the show and literally erupted and fell to pieces. It was something out of like a Zelda video game or something. And then it just really has, they said Memorial Day originally. Now they're saying more like Labor Day. And I imagine it's not, they're probably going to pass it off as a safety thing or something. But they wouldn't continue it at the other parks if that was a real safety concern. They'd shut it down immediately. So my thought is that the show is very expensive to put on. Maybe they're using that as a cover for a cost cutter, which I can't blame them. They have a really good excuse to do it, I don't know. Don't want to speak on their behalf. I don't know. I'm just speculating out loud. Okay. Here's a fun one. The story number 5. Bounce Empire opens. It's the world's largest indoor inflatable amusement park. So those bounce houses and stuff, I'm terrified of them because I know the injury rate's really high. But it's at IAPA, it's like a third of the floor. But where's this at? I think it's in Colorado. I'm pulling up the article now. Yep. So it's going to have 55 attractions, 50,000 square foot indoor bounce house with a 30-foot inflatable monster slide. I mean, if you're going to have a world record breaking like theme park kind of thing, I guess that's the way to do it. Mike, you ever engineered a bounce house before?
Honestly, the first thing I think about is I'm glad it's indoors.
Oh yeah.
We've heard a lot about plenty of accidents where something wasn't anchored down properly and the wind took it, and some type of injury or accident or something like that. So I have some friends in the inflatable business, and every time I hear something like that, I'm just like, oh, like who wasn't doing their job, who wasn't operating it correctly, or who wasn't installing it properly, or maintaining something or other. So I think that's a little bit like that attractions industry connection that I was saying earlier, where it's like you hear about an accident and it's kind of like you still kind of feel like you were on the team as well if there was some type of accident. So when I think of inflatables, yes, I do think of injuries and accidents, but having it indoors, that sounds like something that my kids would be interested in doing. And I'd feel a little more comfortable in that than watching somebody just setting it up at the whatever event, and don't really know exactly what they're doing, or so it seems. I shouldn't say that, but
yeah, I mean, I would probably honestly feel comfortable, like, if I had kids, letting them play in one. But where I would draw the line is if I owned one, the neighbor kids are not playing. It's because I would not want to take that liability. Don, thoughts?
My thoughts are, and with as much as there is to do there, it'd be the perfect place to take your kids for their birthday parties. I think that's a great fit for that kind of thing. Birthday parties, or little group events with kids, school groups, that kind of thing.
Awesome, excellent point.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, our number 6 in the pick 6 is Cedar Point's Frontier Festival. It returns this week. The event brings live music, corn-inspired treats to Frontier Town, and it runs through June 18th. Very popular event, and I like the fact that you can do something like this, and it gives you a chance to experience Cedar Point in a way that you normally couldn't. So I'm excited about it. Going to try to check it out. Mike?
Growing up by Cedar Point, we actually have a picture of us, my brothers and I, when we were, I think, 3, 5, and 7 years old. There was a caricature artist that did a picture of us. And I remember riding the mill race and going back into, Frontier Town, and, that we spent a lot of time there. And that was a lot of the fond memories that I have of Cedar Point, is that whole area. 'Cause it's very like a kind of an escape. Cedar Point is always like, when people ask me the difference between Cedar Point and Kings Island, I'm like, well, Cedar Point's a checklist. Like, you got to get your checklist, you got to get your rides in, where Kings Island, you can relax and you can enjoy, kind of the whole area a bit more, than just being thrilled. And so I think the Frontier Town area has always been a bit of an escape area for Cedar Point. So I'm glad that they kind of have the festival to celebrate that.
Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, I already have my hotel breakers booked for June for it. I'm not kidding. I mean, one thing that Cedar Point does very well is their festivals and stuff. And my girlfriend and I went up there about 2 weeks ago, and when we found out the dates for it and stuff, we booked our hotel while we were there for it. So we'll be there. I'll talk about it on the show in June.
Yeah, it's become a staple event for them, and something that guests look forward to. And I like that. It becomes part of the tradition of going to Cedar Point, is you want to do it, and you're going to see the park in a different way.
Cool. What an episode. We finally got Mike Graham on from the Gravity Group. All right. Mike, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. Total honor. Friend of the show. Thank you so much for what you do in the industry and for being such a friend to enthusiasts and stuff. One more time, can you tell us your website, your social, things of that sort, where we can find you?
Yeah, check us out on the 1990s version of advanced technology, the website, thegravitygroup.com. Our social media, we're on Facebook, The Gravity Group, Instagram, The Gravity Group LLC, as well as Twitter. Our Twitter handle's The Gravity Group. Don't forget the. So, yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I had a lot of fun, and I'm finally glad I was able to actually join you guys.
Well, we'll circle back and have you on
Awesome.
again.
Thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
Well, as Don mentioned, we're going to try to do the viewer special next week. So shoot us your tweets with questions and stuff. Mike, for the last time, thank you once again for being on. Don, thank you. Any final words of wisdom?
Well, park's open pretty much daily now with Memorial Day here. Go out, have some
Didn't
fun.
want to hear your sales pitch. I was hoping for words of wisdom. Totally kidding. Mike, do you have any words of wisdom?
I have no wisdom.
Yeah, keep on riding. That was actually what I had a handwritten note from Ron Toomer. I met him one time, and that's what he. I was at actually when I was had my roller coaster model up in Toronto. I met him as a special guest, and I had lunch with his wife and him, and it was a really special time. It was kind of mind blowing, epic, celebrity. So yeah, it was really cool.
We'll have to get that whole story next time you're on. But once again, make sure that if you're listening to us, thank you for listening. But we're much more handsome on YouTube. So search for the Attractions Group podcast on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast apps, Google, Spotify, Apple. How do I forget Apple? And look for us on Twitter at attractions_GRP. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. It's summer. Go to your local park.